Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is, and namaste. Welcome to episode, I think it's 138 of Left Side of the Aisle. This is for December in 2013. I'm your host. My name is Larry Erickson, and for the next half hour or so, I'm going to be talking about things that I think you should know about and should think about. If you have any reactions to the show, you can contact me directly. The email address is whoviating, WHOVIATING at AOL.com. And if you didn't catch that, go to my website. It's called Lotus, Surviving a Dark Time. And you can get the email address from there, or if you prefer, you can leave a comment there. Just please, if you do email me, please include something in the subject line like, left side of the aisle or something, so I know it's not spam. And be a little patient. I can be slow about answering email, but I do answer. You will get an answer. All right, with that, let's plunge right into it. First off, as I always like to start when the opportunity arises, we have some good news. And this is really good news. Unhappily, it may be temporary good news, but even if it proves to be temporary, it's still a good thing because it shows a move in the right direction. On Monday, December 16th, U.S. District Court Judge Richard Leon ruled that the National Security Agency's controversial phone metadata program, where they're collecting data on literally millions and millions of Americans' telephone records, is probably unconstitutional. The ruling came in a lawsuit filed by conservative activist and, frankly, flake named Larry Klayman. It charges that the program violates the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. Leon, in responding to a government motion to dismiss the case, said, this is part of his ruling, quoting, "The court concludes that plaintiffs have standing to challenge the constitutionality of the government's bulk collection and querying of phone record metadata, that they have demonstrated a substantial likelihood of success on the merits of their Fourth Amendment claim of unlawful search and seizure, and that they will suffer irreparable harm absent relief." What's more, Leon slammed the very idea that this massive spying actually works. Quoting the ruling again, given the limited record before me at this point in the litigation, most notably the utter lack of evidence that a terrorist attack has ever been prevented because searching the NSA database was faster than other investigative techniques, I have serious doubts about the efficacy of the metadata collection program as a means of conducting time-sensitive investigations into cases involving imminent threats of terrorism. The government, Leon wrote, does not cite a single instance of the spying stopping an imminent attack. The government has actually, in public, has repeatedly insisted that this program has helped stop literally dozens of attacks, but they presented the judge with no evidence to that end, not even in a closed hearing. Leon issued a preliminary injunction against the program, but he suspended the order in order to allow the Justice Department time to appeal, and he said he fully expects that the department will, and that an appeal could take 6 months. The thing is, this case is one of several that are coming up in these months now. And another, during a hearing in Manhattan court last week, U.S. District Judge William Paley III was described by observers as being receptive to the idea that Americans have at least some privacy in their phone records. The government's defense of the constitutionality of this entire program has always rested on Smith v. Maryland. This is a case decided by the Supreme Court back in 1979 that found that Americans have no expectation of privacy in who they are calling because they willingly give that information to the phone company. And therefore, police don't need a warrant to get that information themselves. Now, that decision has frankly always struck me as utterly bizarre. I mean, the logic is that because you have to tell the phone company who you're calling in order for them to complete the call, that therefore anybody, because the phone company knows, therefore the government can know too. And in fact, this ruling has been expanded to cover things like bank records, because the bank knows what deposits and transactions you've made, therefore the government can too. It's always struck me as incredibly bizarre, but unfortunately is, for now, the law. James Madison, I believe, would be aghast. Anyway, that's the argument. That's the argument. Thing is, however, in that case, in Smith v. Maryland, the only thing the police would know is the number that you called. Well, during the hearing, Pauly asked, doesn't the information collected here, that is in this metadata collection program, reveal a lot more? And in fact, it does. The metadata the NSA collects can reveal a lot more than just the number that you are calling. Enough so, in fact, that at least 2 members of the current Supreme Court have expressed the opinion that the Smith decision is outdated and needs to be changed. In fact, by the way, in his opinion, Judge Leon also addressed this same issue. He called current technology almost Orwellian and a far cry from that found or even envisioned in 1979, the technology that justified the Smith ruling. Now, the suit before Paley in New York was filed by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and its New York affiliate. And this was done just days after the program was revealed in news reports based on documents leaked by Edward Snowden. An earlier ACLU suit about secret government spying was dismissed in 2012 because the Supreme Court ruled in that case because the program was secret. That meant the plaintiffs couldn't prove that they had been targeted by it, and so they had no legal standing to challenge it, which to me is another very bizarre kind of twisted logic. The very fact that the program is secret means it's like, because it's secret, you don't know if you're affected, therefore you can't challenge it. It essentially means that anything the government declares secret is beyond legal challenge. But in any event, the point here is that this program now has become so well known that the White House and intelligence officials have actually acknowledged its existence that this whole issue of standing, frankly, simply should not apply here. Now, Judge Pauly did not issue a ruling or any kind of injunction, but he did say the hearing left him with a lot to think about. Meanwhile, Stuart Dellery, who heads the Justice Department's Civil Division, said Judge Pauly should wait for the Supreme Court to rule on bulk data collection before trying to resolve the issue himself. In other words, just let it sit. Just wait until the Supreme Court gets around to it sometime. Which sounds to me very much like a man very much afraid that he's going to lose. Now, whatever Judge Pauly rules, however that case ultimately turns out at the district court level, it'll be appealed, of course, as will Judge Leon's case, however that turns out. And the point is, no matter what happens at the appeals level, either or more likely both of these cases are going to wind up at the Supreme Court. So none of this good news is definitive. It may not last. We could still fall victim to the court's historical, traditional reluctance to challenge executive authority on anything labeled national security. Now, in fact, in a number of ways, the Fourth Amendment is already on life support as it is, and so it's hard to say what will happen. Still, even in light of that, this does mean that there is an increasing push, an increasing sense that we maybe gone too far in surrendering our privacy and our rights for the chimera of supposed security. Far enough, in fact, that Representative James Sensenbrenner, this is the man who is the primary author of the Patriot Act, which is the law that the NSA and the White House say is what makes all what they're doing constitutional. He says he is shocked by their interpretation of the law. He says what the NSA is doing is illegal and unconstitutional. And that change in attitude is a very good thing, especially because it's especially a noteworthy and good thing because a few weeks ago there was another revelation from the Snowden, what we might call the Snowden papers. It came out that shortly before these leaks began, this is back in February 2012, shortly before these leaks began, the NSA proposed a 4-year mission strategy to enable the agency to acquire data from, quoting, anyone, anytime, anywhere, and eventually acquire all digital information available anywhere in the world. The document talks about breaking all encryption, including by investing in the industrial base in order to control and direct technological development in a way suitable for the spooks, and by using spies in companies abroad in order to decode their decryption tools. This document, this NSA document, also claims that existing U.S. laws are not adequate to the spy's desires, and it sets an objective of, quoting, aggressively pursuing legal authorities and a policy framework mapped for fully to the information age. Put more simply, the NSA wants more power. They think there are too many restrictions, that they're not free enough. The agency wants more power to spy anytime, anywhere, any way it wants, and thinks that having to do dumb things like get a dumb warrant from some dumb court is just dumb, and that dumb old Constitution is just dumb, so there. Now, personally, I find it interesting that for a while now we have not heard too much from the NSA sycophants like Senator Dianne Feinstein. It would be nice if their silence was due to embarrassment or better yet shame, but I doubt that. I think they're well beyond shame. But at least it does mean that it appears for now that kissing up to the spooks is politically not a good thing to do. That's a good thing. Thank you, Edward Snowden. By the way, as a footnote to all this, you may remember that I referred to Larry Klayman, the guy who brought the suit that's before Judge Leon, a flake. He is. He once sued his own mother. He's closely affiliated with the birther movement. He thinks Barack Obama is a Muslim. He's the guy who a little while back wanted Obama, quote, to get up, put the Quran down, get up off his knees, and to figuratively come out with his hands up. So he is a flake, but the fact is there is a very old and very wise saying that if it's the truth, what does it matter who said it? All right, from there, moving on to one of our regular weekly features, it's the Clown Award, given as always for meritorious stupidity. This time, the stupid is wrapped up in a nice package of what? So our winner of the Big Red Nose this week is that dashing darling of fiscal foolishness, House Budget Committee Paul Ryan, or as we call him, Paul Rantin. Speaking on the right-wing Hugh Hewitt radio show on Tuesday, Rantin raised the possibility of demanding that the White House approve the Keystone XL pipeline as a condition for raising or suspending the debt ceiling. Okay, first, let's take a moment to remember what the Keystone XL pipeline is. This is a proposed pipeline that would carry tar sands from Canada to refineries in Texas. Tar sands being about the dirtiest and most polluting way of collecting oil, of obtaining oil that there is. Now let's take another moment to remember what's involved in the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is the limit placed on how much money the government can essentially borrow by, like selling treasury bonds and such things. Raising the debt ceiling does not create more debt. It enables the government to have the means to pay its debts, to pay the bills for things Congress has already approved. Not raising the debt ceiling means the government being unable to pay its bills, meaning potentially defaulting on its debts, meaning the cost of future borrowing is much higher, assuming you can get buyers for your bonds anyway. Okay, with that in mind, let's get back to Rantin. We've never just done nothing, he said, which is actually untrue. Most times the debt ceiling has been raised without anything, but never mind. We've never just done nothing, he said. We want to make sure that we're taking steps in the direction of fiscal conservatism, of fiscal responsibility. I, for one, think we need to do more in the energy sector. I believe we need to approve the Keystone Pipeline. We need to produce regulatory certainties to all this private capital that develops this energy boon. We could be an energy independent continent within a decade if we stop the government from stopping it from happening. If we just get the government out of the way, it could be a real renaissance of oil and gas exploration in America, lower our gas prices, stop sending this money to foreign countries. Now, this is actually a big come down from days past, from the glory days. The right wing would really prefer to use the debt ceiling to force cuts or better yet changes in Medicare or Social Security or better yet both, but they figured out that that just ain't going to fly. So they're setting their sights now a good deal lower at a program that the White House has already been suspected by environmentalists of favoring. Okay, fine with all that. Where's the stupid? Well, it's right there in the middle of the blather. We could be an energy-independent continent within a decade if we stop the government from stopping from happening. Yep, just get the government out of the way. It'll be a renaissance, absolute renaissance. And what's more, there'll be pudding for everyone. All right, first, the Keystone XL pipeline doesn't have a single thing to do with energy independence. The oil that would be refined in Texas would be shipped and sold overseas. There's a reason the pipeline goes to a port, people. Second, get the government out of the way. What, government like in the EPA? Have you looked at China recently? But here's the real thing. Here's the real thing. You want to drill more? You want to become even more dependent on fossil fuels? Really? This is what you want? Even in the face of all the scientific evidence about global warming, including more bizarre weather like snow in Cairo for the first time in over 100 years, coupled with the recent news that last month was worldwide the hottest the hottest November in at least 133 years. None of this means anything to you, Paulie? That doesn't give you pause in your desire to see more drilling, more oil, more gas, more fossil fuels, more pollution, more waste, more profits for Exxon and the rest, and more? And, well, actually, no, yeah, I thought it wouldn't. You really, really are a clown. And we are taking a break. And we're back. All right, now I have an example of everything you need to know, which is an occasional feature where everything you need to know about a topic you can learn in a very short time. In this case, it's everything you need to know about what side the Obama administration is really on in one sentence. Tim Geithner, who was one of Barack Obama's key economic advisors even before becoming Treasury Secretary during the Wall Street bailout, during which time his appointment calendar detailed extensive contacts with the CEOs of Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, and Citigroup, is to become president and managing director of private equity firm Warburg Pincus. And that is everything you need to know. All right, actually, here we have what you might consider another example of everything you need to know. In this case, everything you need to know in two headlines. These appeared sequentially on my news aggregator. Sandy Hook gunmaker profits up 52% in year since massacre. Arapahoe High School shooting leaves at least 1 dead, 2 injured. And that is everything you need to know. But in this case, I'm actually going to do some backfill. In the first article, the grossly misnamed Freedom Group, also known as the Remington Outdoor Company, reported that its profits have gone up 52% in the year since one of its death machines, a Bushmaster rifle, was used to slaughter 20 children and 6 adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Cerberus Capital Management, a private equity firm that owns Freedom Group, said in the wake of that massacre that it was going to sell its interest in the company. It never did. Apparently the profits were more important than the people. Now Remington, however, is not the only death dealer smiling here. Sturm Ruger, the largest U.S. gunmaker, predicts its earnings will be up 52% over last year. Its profits for the first 3 quarters of 2013 were up 66% over the same period for a year before. And in the first half of 2013, which is the most recent figures available, Smith & Wesson saw its profits up 70% over the same period in 2012. Meanwhile, it's actually gotten easier in this country to buy a gun in the last year. Since Newtown, there have been 70 state laws passed weakening gun controls, only 39 strengthening them. You can carry more guns in more places, and every state in the nation now allows you to carry a concealed weapon. And so now there is another school shooting. This one at Arapahoe High School in Centennial, Colorado, which is just 8 miles from Columbine High School and just 17 miles from Aurora. Arapahoe was the 25th school shooting since Newtown. That's about 1 every 2 weeks. At least 18 people have died in these attacks. And what's the answer to this we hear? What answer for this do we hear over and over and over again? Why, it's that we need more guns. We need more people packing heat. We need teachers, administrators, janitors walking the halls of our schools armed. In 2013, 80 bills were introduced in 33 states to that end, and in 8 of those states, Alabama, Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, and, not a surprise, Texas, the bills passed and became law. And this is all because, according to, and the words of Wayne LaPipi LePew, the executive director of the Nutsoid Rabbit Brains of America, the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Which is nothing but a sick superhero fantasy. A couple of years ago, the TV show 2020 did an experiment. Took a group of college students with varying degrees of familiarity with guns, gave them professional training exceeding that required by most states for getting a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Then the producers recorded students reacting to simulations in which an aggressive active gunman entered a classroom. In every simulation, every single time, the student failed to stop the aggressor and was badly or fatally wounded. In fact, in one case, the student almost shot a victim. Weapons experts will tell you that only professionals who drill continuously in live shooter simulations can expect to hope to succeed in such a chaotic situation as an actual shooter. Even cops who go a month or two without a drill start to lose the ability. In fact, a New York Times study from a couple of months ago revealed that even highly trained New York City police officers who discharge their guns in public hit their intended target only 34% of the time. In other words, 2 times out of 3, they hit something or someone else. But according to the gun freaks, what we need to stop more Columbines, more Newtowns, more Arapahoes is thousands of semi-trained people carrying guns in our schools, ready to play Batman. Terrific. Which is, I expect, more than you needed to know. All right. One last thing here. I expect you know that a budget deal to keep the federal government functioning for a time, anyway, is on the verge of being finalized, and in fact is likely a done deal by the time you see this. Everybody in D.C. loves it, except the right-wing purity police, which don't like anything that doesn't involve more money for big business and more toys for the Pentagon to play with. But everybody else seems to like it. The Gopper leadership likes it. The Democrat leadership likes it. The amazing Mr. O likes it. Everybody's going, oh wow, isn't this fantastic? We actually had a kind of sort of maybe something we can actually call a compromise. And after all, isn't that what's really important? Before the House vote, Representative John Fleming, he's a Gopper from Louisiana, said, I'm one of the most conservative of the caucus and I'm leaning yes on this. He said he didn't hear any major objections among his colleagues. We actually found a compromise that does not assault the values of either side, he said. Well, I can't speak for the politicos and pundits, but I can say this. It assaults my values. It is, in fact, the outrage of the week. It assaults my values when this deal only recovers half of the sequestrations cuts in 2014 and only a quarter of them in 2015, and half of that recovery is going to the military, even though the U.S. spends more on the military, on weapons, on wars and preparation from wars than the next 9 biggest spenders combined, and in fact we spend nearly as much as the entire rest of the world combined. It assaults my values when it says nothing about an extension of unemployment benefits, which means about 1.3 million Americans are going to lose those benefits this week, which will lead to 300,000 fewer jobs next year because of the loss of that economic stimulus. It assaults my values when this deal cuts pensions of federal workers and military retirees, but leaves gaping tax loopholes that benefit the richest among us untouched. It assaults my value when, as expressed in this deal, we are still so damn concerned with deficits, even as 1 in 5 children in this country is living in poverty. And 9% of all children in this country are living in a household with unemployed parents. That is double the rate of 2007, the year before the recession driven by Wall Street's greed began. It assaults my, the whole stinking thing assaults my values. It assaults my values that we nickel and dime programs for the poor while income inequality balloons to levels not seen since the roaring 20s, with the richest 1% of us getting nearly 20% of all national income. It assaults my values that raising the minimum wage is even a topic that has to be discussed when the current federal minimum wage is worth 23% less than it was in 1968. And in fact, if that minimum wage had kept pace with increases in worker productivity in that time, it would now be about $25 an hour. It assaults my values that we mock, deride, humiliate, scorn people on food stamps, and are now talking about an $8 billion cut over the next 10 years on top of the $5 billion cut that took place in November because Obama and the congressional Democrats never put back the money, the stimulus money they took out of the program. And we're doing that even as hunger persists, and I'm offended that we're going to be expected to be happy about this because it's only $8 billion. It assaults my values that the epithet takers got so much as a fingernail hold in our political discourse. It assaults my values that even as the portion of the economy going to corporate profit soars, the portion going to wages hit record lows, that even as profits in the manufacturing sector now are soaring, wages in that same sector have fallen 3% in real terms since 2009. It assaults my values that no one has and no one will go to jail over the fraud committed and still being committed by the banks against homeowners and others over this mortgage crisis, that those same giant banks, which be buying too big to fail, had to be bailed out by us, are now even bigger. It assaults my values that 25% of all people with jobs in this country still qualify for public assistance. It assaults my values that poverty, that hunger, that homelessness, that unemployment, that underemployment, that despair and desperation persist when they don't have to. When we have enough to make sure that everyone has enough. We have the resources, we have the technology, we have the abundance to see to it that everyone has enough. Not luxury, not a life of Riley, but enough. It assaults my values that we don't do that we are so pathetically far behind other developed countries toward that. Talking about this budget deal, Katrina vanden Heuvel said it well, quoting her, "Advocates of compromise for compromise's sake argue that everybody sacrifices something in a tough negotiation. That's an easy mantra to toss around when you're talking about sacrificing political cover as opposed to, say, a roof over your head." The fact that we are supposed to not only make those compromises, but we are supposed to celebrate them as good things simply because somebody's calling them compromises is an assault on my values. It is, in fact, the outrage of the week. We're going to end with our regular weekly reminder. As of December 18th, at least 11,601 people have been killed in this country by guns since Newtown, at least 97 of them in Massachusetts. You have the best week you possibly can. We will see you next week. Peace.